Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on our next steps for redistricting. We have now our panelists, and I'm turning it on to our Executive Director for the National Black Nonpartisan Redistricting Organization, Philip Thompson.
Good evening, everybody. We're here today because the National Black Nonpartisan Redistricting Organization and our partners, One Virginia 2021, the League of Women Voters, and CASA, wanted to do a session because people are saying that we're in failure now, that the Redistricting Commission has sent this matter to the Supreme Court. And we're here to tell you that no, it hasn't. We're not in failure. The process is continuing. The legislation, the way it was set up in the constitutional amendment, was set up so that if the commission could not reach its decision, it would move this process to the Virginia Supreme Court. But what we're here today to tell you is that it's not going to the Supreme Court in the normal way a court case would go. I'm an attorney. I kind of anticipated that we would be here, and a lot of what we've done, a lot of what's been done to date will only help the court reach a what we believe are good maps. This process has been what we thought it would be. It has brought transparency to the process. It has also allowed the citizens to be involved with this process throughout, and tonight we're going to explain how citizens can continue to be involved even though this matter is before the Virginia Supreme Court. It is important that you understand that this is the beginning of another phase of the process. This is not the end of the process. This is the beginning of another phase, and that the ultimate objective with this is to when we went through this process was to allow citizens and a commission, and if that didn't work, the Supreme Court to write maps, taking this from the politician and bringing it back to the citizens. And people will say, no, it can't be the citizens, the courts are involved. But as we'll explain tonight, citizens can still be involved in this process. Citizens must be involved with this process. And we will continue to work to shape maps that represent Virginia. So at this time, I want to turn it over to the Executive Director of One Virginia 2021. They have this saying about, they used to say James Brown was the hardest working man in show business. Well, the hardest working person in redistricting is Liz White. Liz, please join us.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We've got a lot of attendees giving up your time on a Thursday to hear about redistricting in the Supreme Court, and we're so grateful that you're here and hope you can pass this information along to anyone who couldn't join us this evening. We are recording this and we will make it widely available because I know everybody's got a lot of questions. There's a lot of information we just don't know yet. The court is kind of figuring this out as far as what their part in it's going to look like to some extent. So we're going to answer every question that we can. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and that way we can try to get to as many of them as possible. We've got a lot to cover, but we're really glad you're here. We've got a really great panel. I'm going to turn this over first to our dear friend, Suzanne Almeida from Common Cause, and she's going to give us kind of a national perspective on Virginia and our progress and our place in kind of the national landscape of redistricting reform. So Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time with us, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Liz. And give me just a second while I shoot. All right, is this working? There it goes. So like Liz said, my name is Suzanne Almeida. I am the Redistricting and Representation Council for Common Cause. So we work nationwide, including having a bunch of members and supporters in Virginia. We've been working with One Virginia 2021, as well as other partners on the ground, including CASA and the National Black Redistricting Organization, to make sure redistricting in Virginia is as transparent and as functional as possible. So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about where we are, right? Just overview. So this is as of 2 days ago. Do not quote me on this because things have changed, but generally you can see that we're, sorting things into several categories: pre-map hearings, draft maps released. final maps adopted, and then litigation, either pre-map or post-map. So you can see that Virginia is right in the mix where everyone else is, with some draft maps released. Again, obviously Virginia is a special case because we're not exactly sure how that fits into the Supreme Court special master and whether those special masters will use those draft maps. But it still does give you an idea that you all are not at all behind, right? You are right in the part of the process where most other states are. So just looking really carefully, and another thing to keep in mind as we're looking at Virginia in the national landscape is that Virginia is one of the states with undergoing this redistricting process with a commission, with new rules, with new processes for the first time, right? And so we've seen 7 states who have adopted new redistricting reform between 2018 and 2021. You can see those states in green. And then we also have Virginia as one of the 14 states who has adopted prison gerrymandering reform. So while we are super excited that you all have done all of this great work, you certainly made it difficult for yourselves, right? We know that there's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of new policies and procedures that need to go into place every time we do this, every time a redistricting effort is underway. And so I think it's really important to look at the big picture and look at where Virginia is situated vis-a-vis the rest of the country. There are still the vast majority of states where redistricting is driven either entirely by a legislature or mostly by a legislature. And in Virginia, you have a 50-50 commission, which has its challenges, but it has created a process where there are some definite positives. So what we know, and again, this is very top level, right? We know that the commission has said that the state legislative maps will be drafted by SCOVA. We know that the commission reached an impasse and were not able to decide on which draft maps they were going to offer for public comment. But we also know that this was all done in public, right? We saw this terribly frustrating sausage being made, and that is a huge improvement from what we've seen in the past. We know that the commission has until next Friday to finalize congressional maps, right? They're in that 14-day extension after their initial deadline. And we are not sure exactly what they're doing, right? We know that they're currently not meeting. They're waiting to see if some sort of internal agreement can be reached. The lawyers are talking, the mappers are talking. It is likely that commission members are talking. Obviously, hopefully we're not violating any ascension laws, but talking behind the scenes, because so much of redistricting is about trade-offs and values and debate and hard conversations. So they still have a possibility that they are going to reach a final map. Now, we don't know that, but I think it is too early to throw up our hands and say for sure, no congressional map out of the commission. So I want to talk about what now, right? So as Phil said right at the top, this is not failure. We are still in the process, both in the state legislative maps, which are state house and state senate, to be really clear, and in the congressional maps. And what we know is this process was built into the constitutional amendment. We knew that we needed a fail-safe because commissions, just like this one, can reach roadblocks, particularly commissions that are 50-50 Democrats and Republicans. And so we thought through this, right? The folks who put this together, One Virginia 2021, National Nonpartisan Black Redistricting Organization, CASA, Common Cause, other partners thought through how we are going to make sure that Virginians end up with good maps. And that's where the Supreme Court comes into play. So in an effort to kind of bring a court proceeding out into the public, and I'm going to talk kind of, just so y'all know, very top lines. Y'all will hear later from Virginia attorney who has deep understanding of the nitty gritty. So I'm just going to talk general policy, save all of your hard questions for him. So each caucus can nominate 3 special masters. So that could be a total of 12, right? Majority, minority in the House, majority and minority in the Senate. That's 4 times 3, that is 12. I'm just checking my math here because it's 7 p.m. And those special masters then will go to the court, right? They have to provide resumes, they have to provide kind of letter of recommendation. And then the court will choose one special master from each party who will be responsible for drawing the state legislative maps. Now, there is a lot we don't know about how this process is going to play out, right? We know that special masters have been used a number of times by a number of states, including Virginia, to draw maps. But this is a new process for Virginia, right? We have never had a court in Virginia draw maps as kind of an issue of first impression, right? And so there's a lot of questions, and that's okay. So as we are moving forward, we will hopefully get answers to some of those questions, but I also think that those questions are really important as an advocacy tool, right? So we can say, hey, court, how are you making this transparent? Hey, court, how are your special masters working together? Hey, court, what kind of rules are they going to have about talking to outside parties, right? We can ask those questions in a way that makes us better advocates and pushes this process to a better place. I do want to talk really quickly just about courts and redistricting, right? We know courts participate in redistricting all the time, state courts and federal courts. But typically, when a court is involved in redistricting, it's in the evaluative context, right? They're looking at a map, someone is challenging a map, and the court is responsible for saying, yes, this is okay, it passes muster, regardless of what you're challenging it on, or no, go back and draw it again. There are a couple instances where courts have, say, remanded to a legislature or sent it back to the legislature, right? And the legislature failed to draw a map. This happened in Pennsylvania, this happened in Virginia. And so the court appoints a special master, and a special master is kind of a disinterested party, a disinterested expert whose job it is to actually draw the maps. So just to be really clear, and I'm going to say this probably multiple times, I think multiple people are going to say this multiple times, it's not the people in the black robes who are drawing the maps. It is the experts who do this for a living, have a deep understanding of redistricting law and mapping and demography, who will be ultimately drawing those maps. Like I said, it is an unusual situation in Virginia, right? We're not evaluating maps. These are maps from scratch, not maps to fix a problem. But there is nothing to suggest that special masters are significantly biased for one party or another, right? There's nothing to suggest that this process, now that it is at the Supreme Court of Virginia, will not be fair. And I think there's work that we all need to do, and you'll hear from Liz and other folks later on about kind of how we do that work, right? There's still work for us, there's still place for us as advocates, but there's nothing to think that, it's just out of our hands, it's gonna be unfair, we might as well throw our hands up and call it a failure. We are just not there. And then finally, I want to take a minute and talk about how Virginia's process, even with its challenges, compares to what we're seeing in other states, right? So my job, I work in states across the country, primarily focusing on states who are on the eastern half, mostly because I do not like to stay up late. So the time zones work better for me on this side of the country. So what did we see in Virginia that we haven't seen in other states? So we have seen more public hearings and opportunities for comment and the creation of a robust record, right? In a lot of states even where they've had public hearings, and I'm thinking of states like, say, North Carolina or Georgia, even to some extent like Ohio, right? Where there have been lots and lots of public hearings, it is very clear that the map makers, because they were legislators, were not actually paying attention, right? They're not taking into account what that testimony is. And I think in Virginia, we saw, even though, again, the sausage is never fun, right? But like we saw how that public input and public testimony really affected the process in a positive way. The commission also conducted its business in public, right? Including having the tricky conversations that so often happen behind closed doors, right? Things like debating on the Voting Rights Act, debating on race and redistricting, right? These are hard conversations. They are harder conversations when you have them in public. And what we see is that there is this trend across the country this year and in years past, but I think it's particularly notable this year, where map makers are saying, hey, we're either not going to consider race at all, which is problematic for lots of reasons, or they are saying anytime we talk about race, we're going to go into an executive session, right? We don't need to have that conversation in the public because we don't want to get accused of racial gerrymandering. Virginia didn't do that, right? Virginia had these tricky conversations in the public eye. Do I wish the conversations had gone differently sometimes? Sure. But my point is that these were not smoke-filled back rooms. This was happening so that we could comment, right? I know what happened in some of those conversations, and I can say, hey, sir, that's a misinterpretation of the law, or yes, I agree with this interpretation of the law. And we can't do that in many other states. And then finally, and I really want to highlight this one, is that the leadership by non-politicians on the commission was really extraordinary and something that I think led the commission through some of the challenges, right? And to as much success as they have had. I am not saying that the commission is perfect. I'm not saying the leadership has been perfect, but I am saying that I think that there is something really powerful about non-interested politicians, right? Average, ordinary, everyday people who volunteer to take on this incredibly difficult role and then shepherd this relatively difficult group of people through some very tough conversations, right? So these are things that, while not perfect, right, Virginia has leaps and bounds better than what we're seeing in other states. Now, does this mean that our work is done in Virginia? Absolutely not. Does this mean that we get through this redistricting cycle and say, well, that was perfect, we don't ever have to go back to a drawing board, we don't have to look at this critically? Absolutely not. But I think it behooves us to feel good about the things that are working, even while we are acknowledging that there are challenges. And with that, I will toss it back to Liz.
And I will unmute. Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's always great to hear from you. You have such great perspective and just wealth and breadth of knowledge. And we really appreciate your time and your expertise. The Virginia attorney that Suzanne mentioned is our own Greg Lucyk. Greg is the former chief staff attorney for the Supreme Court of Virginia and a longtime board member of One Virginia 2021. He has been involved in the redistricting reform effort for a long, long time, and he's just got some really unique perspective on this upcoming part of the process. So we're thrilled to have him here with us. I think he's going to answer a lot of the questions that I already see in the chat and the Q&A. So Greg, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz, and welcome everyone. I am Greg Lucyk. I retired from the Supreme Court in 2013 as chief staff attorney. I worked there for 11 years as counsel to the court and supervised a number of attorneys who assisted the court with a variety of projects and reviewing cases. Prior to that time, I spent 18 years in the Attorney General's office as a senior assistant attorney general. And I handled a number of redistricting cases, litigation that went to the Supreme Court and the federal courts during that time. I've been following the process with great interest, and I want to make a few comments about why this is really a good thing that the maps have gone to the Supreme Court. It's unfortunate that the commission wasn't able to complete its process. But the Supreme Court is the stopgap. And what it does is it takes the legislature completely out of the process. And the maps will be drawn by the justices with the assistance of special masters who will be appointed by the court. So the legislature has no part in this process of the court's function of drawing the maps. They are finished when they go to the court. So that's a good thing, because one of our goals was to get the legislature out of this redistricting process. And so this does that. And I know there's been some concern expressed that the court is heavily Republican, and the justices, some of the justices were appointed by Republican majority legislatures. There are 7 justices on the court, and they serve 12-year terms. So it's not as if they're going to be up for reappointment or their work is going to be scrutinized or their decisions scrutinized anytime soon. In fact, a couple of them, the Chief Justice, Justice Lemons, is obliged to retire in 2024 because he will age out of the process. Justice William Mims is not seeking another term. His term is up in March of 2022, so a new justice will be appointed. All of these justices pretty much were confirmed unanimously by the Senate. There's one exception, that's Stephen McCullough, and he was appointed as a result of a controversy. Then Governor McAuliffe appointed an interim justice when there was a retirement on the court, Jane Roush. And for the first time in about 103 years, the General Assembly did not approve of the reappointment of Jane Roush, but instead appointed Justice McCullough. And so that created some controversy. But he's a very fair individual. I know him. I worked with him in the Attorney General's office. Justice Cleo Powell was in the Attorney General's office with me when we worked together for Mary Sue Terry. I don't think we need to be concerned that somehow there is a partisan bias on this court. These justices have sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. They take their job seriously, and I truly believe that they will apply the law and the facts, and they will follow the redistricting criteria in making their decision, and they will be assisted by highly experienced special justices who will be providing them with the potential maps that they ultimately will sign off on. So let me talk a little bit about the process, because the House and Senate districts now have gone to the court as of last Sunday. That was the final deadline for the commission to propose maps for the House of Delegates and the Senate of Virginia, and it did not do so. So as of 12:59 or 11:59 on Sunday night, this past Sunday night, their jurisdiction over the process expired. And under the statutes that govern this, and the Constitution really doesn't set out much in the way of process for the court. It just simply says that in the event that commission can't reach a decision or the General Assembly can't reach a decision, that the court would establish the districts. There was a companion statute passed at that same time that set out the processes and procedures that the Supreme Court must follow in doing its job of establishing these districts. And one of the first things that happens is under the statute and the statute does require the court to appoint 2 special masters to assist them in the process and do the initial maps. And those special masters are appointed by the court on the basis of recommendations from for special masters from the leadership in the House and the Senate. They have 7 days from that deadline date from last Sunday to recommend at least 3 each special masters to the Supreme Court. So that appointment or that recommendation of nominees is due this coming Monday, November 1st. That's the first business day after the expiration of the time that the commission failed to achieve its function. So the clock is ticking and the process has started. And as of Monday, the Supreme Court will have recommendations or nominations of special masters from the leadership in the GOP and the leadership in the Democrats. And they will by majority vote. There are 7 justices, so it will take 4 justices to vote and approve the appointment of a special master from each side. And now the special masters, you've heard a little bit about them, but you know that they are generally law professors or political science professors. They are academics. They have a lot of experience doing this. And as Suzanne noted, you don't see partisan implications in the work that they do, whether it's a remedial map or a new map. And that's because of their special expertise in doing this on the basis of what the law requires, what the criteria requires. And so I think we can be confident that the court is going to get some high quality, fair and balanced maps from these special masters on the basis to make their judgment as to which map should be approved to constitute the redistricting for 2021. Once the court determines who it's going to appoint as special masters, it will enter an order, and the order will identify who the 2 masters who are appointed are, and the court's rules, and just as an aside, the court was required under the statute adopted to enact a rule implementing some of the additional procedures. And its rule requires that the special masters, once that order is entered, have 30 days from the date of that order to produce the maps, or a map to submit to the justices. So it could be a map or maps, and they will have 30 days. So the process will move along pretty well once the special masters are appointed. The special masters, under the court's rule, may, and in fact, likely will, seek the records from the commission's proceedings. And so Rule 3 of the Supreme Court's rule allow the special masters to request records from the Virginia Redistricting Commission, the General Assembly of Virginia, and the Division of Legislative Services, and all 3 of them. So that means they will have all of the maps, the submissions, the comments, everything that went before the commission will be available to the special masters to review. Those will be filed with the clerk and available in the clerk's office. And so we think the special masters are going to have a complete record upon which to base their decisions. And that's why at this point, public comment is important, because there are certain maps and proposals that provide a more fair, more balanced approach to redistricting for the House and Senate. And the public can let them know by submitting comments to the Supreme Court. And that is also provided for in the court's rule. Rule 4 provides for public participation. And Part A of that rule says that the public may participate in the court's redistricting deliberations through the submission of written comments. Such comments must be provided in the form of a letter addressed to the clerk of the Supreme Court of Virginia and referencing these rules and procedures. So the avenue is there to provide public comment on any aspect of this redistricting process as it's completed by the court. And now the court has, we're hoping that they're going to give a little more definition to how the public process should work. The court typically receives filings in the office of the clerk, and that's where these comments will go. by any number of means, by US mail, by overnight delivery, by hand delivery, and they have an email address. And my expectation, hopefully, is that all of these methodologies will be available and that they will make that clear. But in the meantime, all of those avenues are available for public comment. And I do believe that the organizations involved in this are going to help provide information to assist people in being able to make their views available to the court. In addition, there may be an opportunity for public hearings after the special masters actually produce a map. Part B of the public participation rule says that upon a written request submitted by one or both of the special masters, the court, in its discretion, may hold public hearings. Any such hearings will be recorded and posted on the court's public website. So that's something else that the public may want to make clear to the court, that there should be public hearings and an opportunity for folks to appear and comment on these maps. So the opportunity is there. In this instance, in order for there to be hearings, they have to be requested by one of the special masters, and that's something that perhaps we can make happen. So once as I mentioned, the special masters have 30 days from the time of their appointment to produce a map. So this is going to be moving pretty quickly. And once that map is produced, it is to be filed with the clerk. So it becomes, again, another public document that will be available to the public. So we'll have an opportunity to comment. Now, there is no time limitation on how long the court has to consider the map. In my experience, the amount of time it may take the court to make that decision as to whether the map is suitable to promulgate to establish the districts is how controversial it is. If the justices are in agreement that it's a good product, then we may see a decision pretty quickly on that. If there's some controversy, if the justices are not in agreement that the map is the best opportunity to accomplish the task, then it may take a little longer to get that final decision done because they perhaps will be exchanging memos and having meetings to discuss it. And just like a decision in a case, the cases that are not controversial those opinions come down very quickly. If they're difficult cases that involve a lot of controversy and disagreement, it takes much longer for those decisions to come down. So that's pretty much the timeline for the court itself. And so the bottom line is the process has started, the clock is ticking, and we need to be vigilant and to make the effort to influence the court in this process and in the final decision in producing maps that will redistrict the House of Delegates and the Senate of Virginia. So that's the process, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that folks might have at this point.
All right, Greg, thank you so much. I'm looking at the questions in the Q&A, and I think a lot of them are going to be for you, so please stick around. I'm going to remind everybody there's a couple really good questions in the chat, and I don't want to lose track of them before the end of this. So if everyone could be sure to put your questions in the Q&A, which should be down at the bottom of your screen, rather than just in the chat. I just don't want to lose track of them. So one of the questions I see in the Q&A is what happened to that person from Tufts? Where is she in the process? And the short answer is she's here and she's next. So Moon Duchin and Todd Hendricks are with us from the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering Group at Tufts University. And they are our next speakers. So that's one question answered, and I'm going to turn it over to Moon and Todd.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Moon Duchin, and this is Todd Hendricks. I think because we can't both be spotlighted at the same time, I'm gonna make a couple. Oh, you did it. Well, even better. I'm gonna make a couple of introductory remarks, and then Todd's gonna show you some slides. So I'm a math professor at Tufts, and I've been like waving my hands and jumping around and trying to get the Virginia Commission to like take some help with their analytics from someone, you know, kind of not party affiliated outside the case, who's got a civil rights orientation, and they're like, no thanks. So there you go. But I run a lab at Tufts. It's called the MGGG Redistricting Lab. Todd's one of the amazing data scientists in our group. And we want to show you tonight just a very little bit of kind of what you can do when you're trying to understand plans in a way that goes just a little bit past that surface level of what do they look like? Do they look like dragons? Do they look like wild and spindly and crazy? Do they look reasonable? If you want to kind of see through that and understand a little bit more about how they're going to function, we like to do that kind of forensic analysis that lets you tell plans apart. So we'll show you some examples of that tonight. There's just one thing I wanted to add about the special master conversation that was just happening. First of all, what a term, right? A special master is going to come in and draw the lines for us. That's there's already some legacy and some history there. Two, like what you heard before is that it's usually a law professor or a political scientist. Maybe what got not mentioned yet, it's usually one of two guys, right? There's actually, so, you know, they have to name 12 people, as you heard. The vast bulk of the special master or the court appointed line drawer work more generally in the last few cycles has been done at the state level by two guys. Those are Nate Pursley from Stanford and Bernie Groffman from Irvine. And last time around, Virginia's lines were redrawn. 2 out of 3 of your maps were redrawn by Bernie, right? So I also am waiting with great interest to see how they're going to fill out a list of 12 people to do this job. If like, you know, prior experience is part of the qualifications, they might have a hard time rounding out that list. All right, so in our lab, we are mathematicians, computer scientists, geographers, policy specialists, outreach people, and we've been looking for ways to try to bring technology, especially open source technology, into redistricting to make everything feel more democratic. It shouldn't just be the kind of fancy consultants who have access to the best data and software. It should be all of us, right? We should be able to draw lines ourselves and see the decisions that you have to make when you do it. We should be able to draw our communities. We shouldn't have to just stand at a mic and describe it. We should be able to show it on a map and say, this is where I live. This is my neighborhood. These are my people. This is what's important to us. And this is what we want you to know while you're drawing the lines. So our group has done a lot of work in the last few years, getting geared up, trying to collect public input, synthesize public input, help redistricting commissions, especially all those ones that just got spun up, help them understand the trade-offs that come from different sets of rules and priorities. And then once maps are out, help people see the differences among the maps. So that's just a little bit of background for what it is that we're trying to do. And then I will pass the mic to Todd and ask that when you do get to those slides, I'm going to probably want to have a little bit to say on each. So I'll jump back in and try to politely interrupt at that point. So Todd, take it away.
All right, thank you. Lois, could you share my slides, please?
But don't forget to introduce yourself, Todd.
Well, thank you. I'm Todd Hendricks. I have the great pleasure of working with Moon at the lab. I'm drinking from a fire hose, as I'm sure a lot of you are, learning about redistricting and trying to, help people get good maps enacted. So I will share just a couple of the work products that we put together on Moon's team, myself and some of the other folks that are helping. We've been doing a lot of work in Virginia, and I don't know, Moon, probably a dozen states at this point. So we have a full plate, but me go to slide 2, please. And Moon, you can add to this, but I think, our goal is really to, first of all, just provide tools for citizens to engage. We developed a tool called Districtor a few years ago, and we have a lot of folks using it now. If you have a laptop and an internet connection, you can draw a map with Districtor. And we have kind of an additional layer of analysis where you get to see, demographics, and then we layer on elections. And really, we're trying to provide a comprehensive view on really the performance of a plan in an intuitive way. We are a lab at Tufts, so we do a lot of research, we being Moon mostly, doing a lot of interesting high-level math. But what really attracted me to this lab was the opportunity to apply those insights to real problems, political problems. And then the last thing here is just redistricting, evaluating redistricting plans. We work with governments, we work with, citizens, we work with a wide gamut of different folks that are in this process. It's a really interesting mix of different skill sets, and it's an interesting world. And so we have an opportunity to engage with a bunch of different types of communities. Moving to the mathy slides, I think the way to frame these slides, really, this is the end product of what we call an ensembling method. And ensembling is basically taking advantage of randomness from a probabilistic standpoint, and really trying to draw boundaries around what's reasonable, and what would we expect just from like a random process.
So if I could narrate like what we're seeing on this particular slide, would it be possible to zoom in just the tiniest little bit? Sorry, we should have probably shared it ourselves, but that's okay if not. But so here's what you're seeing on this slide. You see what looks like a bell curve, right? And then you see some colored stripes coming down. So those colored stripes are some plans that came out of the Virginia Independent Commission in the last few weeks. And as you all know, because you're redistricting aficionados, instead of just having one map maker, they had like dueling map makers. So there's one for the Democratic side and one for the Republican side. And so the plans here, if you can see the labels a little bit, are labeled A5 and C1A, and those came from one map maker. And then B5 and C1B, and those came from the other. And then there's VSET's plan, the Virginia Civic Engagement Table, that one of their recent plans is in there just to sort of compare. And the bell curve, all the gray bars that you see, thank you. That is 100,000 random plans. So we built these algorithmic methods that can start with a map and change it and change it and change it some more until you have a whole giant ensemble, as Todd was saying, of 100,000 different ways to do redistricting in Virginia. And what's cool about this is that it's plans that actually comply with Virginia's rules. So they're balanced on the most recent census population. They're compact. They respect your counties and your independent cities. They sort of know about Virginia geography. And then this particular plot that you're seeing, we're asking out of 11 districts times 11 elections that we laid them over. So that's like how you get to 121 here. It's 11 times 11. How many times was a contest close? Are the Democratic versus Republicans, this is a partisan fairness slide, are they within 47 to 53 or closer? And that bell curve shows you, if you closed your eyes and you did totally party blind redistricting, how many competitive contests would you expect? And so you can see that two of these maps have a lot fewer competitive contests than all the others. And I mean, honestly, like we just try to call balls and strikes. We don't have an agenda of trying to make some side look good and some side look bad. But if you're keeping track, that's the Republican map makers plans that have a lot fewer competitive contests, as it turns out in this particular case. And so this is the forensics that I was talking about we like to look past the shapes and see what are the consequences if you look. Yeah, so in this picture, a lower number means it happened less often that a race was close. And so those lines there for the A plans are at 9 and 12. So that's 9 times in one of those plans or 12 times in the other plan that a contest like your attorney general race in 2017, for example, in how many districts would that have been a close race? That's what we're asking here. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm being a math teacher. That's what I do all day. So, so the ones that are higher up, they're creating more competitive conditions if people voted as they've done for the last 10 years, right? And so what you'd like, if you think competitiveness is a good feature of a fair map, you'd like to see the colored lines go all the way to the top of the bell curve. And most of them are falling right in the middle, which means they were probably not drawn with competitiveness in mind. But a couple of them are falling to the bottom, and that suggests that something about their design is not promoting competitiveness. So hopefully that makes sense. You want to add anything about this slide, Todd?
No, just the higher level of, competitiveness is what this is portraying. But, we have the ability to kind of analyze a map from any number of different angles, whether it's demographic distribution, compactness, the traditional redistricting principles that we often hear about. I have a feeling we're probably behind schedule, Liz. Do you?
Well, I think we have time to get through the rest of our slides. So let's go ahead. Go ahead to the next one. Do you want to start this one off?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So this is another example. I mentioned demographics. The x-axis is labeled BVAP as in Black voting age population. And what we're measuring in this particular graph is, again, these citizen plans on the legend. How are the ones that are submitted? How do they compare to randomly generated plans?
Oh, just to be clear, these are commission plans.
Oh, okay, commission. Thank you. Yeah, and I know there might be a temptation to view this as like a time series plot, but actually the x-axis is the congressional districts in Virginia. So what this is saying is that the 11th, you could just say the 11th district in Virginia, the highest BVAP score that we have for like the VSET plan, for example, would be right around 45%. And all of these plans are actually a little bit higher than what we would expect to see from a random process.
Well, a random race blind process. So
right, random race. Yeah.
If we were drawing with no attention to race at all, that's what those box and whiskers are telling us. So we'd expect to see only about 38, 39% of Black voting age population in any particular district, in the district with the highest BVAP, if we were drawing without attention to race. But we're not. We're in the US, it's 2021. The Voting Rights Act is still the law of the land. And while it is, it requires that you do pay some attention to race in order to secure opportunity to elect for Black folks and other minority groups and language minorities as well. So it's not surprising that you're seeing slightly elevated Black population in some of the districts, but this is showing you that's happening a lot more than it would happen just by blind chance. So it's another way to look inside a map and understand something about its design principles. When things are falling outside of the bell curve, so to speak, it's because somebody was trying to do something. And in this case, presumably it's because they were trying to follow the Voting Rights Act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Next. Yeah, and so this is the dimension that we approach it from a political outcome perspective, where we look at a composite of elections from history. In this case, we go back to 2012 presidential, all the way to the left on the x-axis. And as you move closer to the present, you can develop an appreciation for how a plan would perform, basically given a different political scenario, in this case, different political elections. I think what's interesting about, I will note that there's nothing special about 2020. We haven't, that requires an adjustment. We have to include the absentee and provisional ballots, but so we would expect that.
Can I just expand on that for a quick second?
Sure.
Yeah, so what you see here is election data provided by the state. And the state only gave us the votes that were cast on election day. In most years, that's most of the votes. But as you might remember, in 2020, a whole lot of people didn't vote on election day. Millions of people in Virginia alone voted early and absentee, especially absentee. And so that 2020 is not, you should not pay too much attention to those 2020 votes because this is just the election day votes. And we're working on getting the rest of them added in. But for the rest of it, you're seeing a trend of Virginians, that fat blue line, that's Virginians voting very close to 50-50 in all these statewide races. Sometimes a little more Democratic, that's up, sometimes a little more Republican, that's down. And so you see this kind of sea level rising and falling just a little bit in Virginia. And the colors are showing you how the plans would perform. So I find these plots very visually appealing because sometimes you have a plan that whose outcomes jump up and jump down, a very responsive plan. When people's opinions change, the makeup of the delegation changes a lot. And on the other hand, sometimes you have plans that are really very steady, and no matter how people's opinions shift, they always give about the same outcome. And you can see that that does differentiate these plans a little bit. So the blue and the green ones are more responsive. They go up and down a little bit more. Whereas the orange and the brown ones are very stable, but always on the Republican side. And once again, those happen to be the ones that were drawn by the Republican mapmaker. And that's how you can read this plot. It's kind of showing you, not by trying to guess how people are going to vote in the future, but by taking a look at how people voted in the recent past. How would these plans perform if they were stress tested by different patterns of voting? So hopefully that makes some sense. And you get to see, again, sometimes people think about competitiveness the way Todd and I were talking about it before. Competitiveness is about close races. But sometimes people think instead about responsiveness. They want to elect different people as, you know, as conditions change, as time change. They want turnover. They want they don't want the same people elected over and over and over again. And one way to see that is to look for plans that rise and fall. And so this is an example of a way you can like peel back, you know, the layers and look inside a plan and see how it might respond to different electoral conditions.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would add, my last comment is just that, you know, really what I find compelling about our work working with Moon is that, you know, we're nonpartisan, and really our goal is to just add more transparency and empiricism to the process. You know, taking advantage of technology and some of the you know, all of the really sophisticated things that are happening in tech, and bringing those and empowering the people to make sure that, you know, they have a voice in what happens in their community. So that's all I've got.
All right, great. I think if it's okay with everyone, Liz has suggested maybe we can take a quick look at the Q&A and see what questions Todd and I are in a good position to answer, and just field some questions out loud right now. So I'm looking through to see some questions that are kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about. So Carla asks, will special masters take into account the commission's priorities? So special masters or court-appointed line drawers, not always the same thing, but similar, they are given instructions by the court. So the court will tell them, and it's not necessarily going to be the same principles that we're facing the commission. You know, I was involved in the litigation in Pennsylvania in 2017-18, and the court just made a list of criteria and gave them to in the remedial phase when a new map was being selected. So the court typically specifies. Questions, Carolyn Kaywood asked, do the special masters have to use Citygate? No, there's probably no specified software that the special masters have to use. Probably use whatever they're most familiar with. Let's see some other questions.
I see Leslie Middleton asked, please explain how these analyses are going to be used moving forward.
Great. And yeah, a related question, Dorothy Abernathy asked, on the bell curve, wouldn't a line on the extreme right be just as poor as a line on the extreme left? And that's a great question. I love that question. So basically, recently when the Supreme Court heard a number of redistricting cases and decided by a 5-4 ideological split that partisan gerrymandering would be non-justiciable. In other words, they didn't want to think about partisan gerrymandering anymore. What was kind of interesting is that, as far as I could tell, essentially everyone agreed that these like bell curve kind of methods were helpful and relevant. But the 5 conservative justices said, bell curves are great, but how do we know how far is too far out the tails? Oh, that's too hard. Let's not think about it anymore. That's pretty much what happened. That's my shorter version of the Supreme Court verdict decision there. But the question that they were trying to grapple with is, if you have a bell curve, where should you want to be? Should you want to be right in the middle? Is that the best place to be? And the answer in my mind is that it depends what the bell curve is measuring. If it's measuring something that you're seeking more of, then the two sides of the bell curve are not created equal, right? If it's something like competitive seats and you have a priority that tells you to promote competition, you should try to be all the way at the top, right? But on the other hand, if it's something really neutral, then maybe you should try to be in the middle. So the way I think about the bell curves is that being in a tail just tells you that you're extreme, that you were probably promoting some priority that wasn't incorporated into the algorithm that made the curve. That doesn't tell you whether it was a good priority or a bad priority. And Todd, this point came up when Todd was talking about Black voting age population. In that case, just being off the curve means you were trying to do something else with respect to race, in this case, respect the VRA, right? So being off the curve is just information that tells you an agenda was being advanced. And then there's an additional normative decision to make about whether that agenda is permissible. Does that make sense? I hope that makes some sense. Ellie Tucker asked if I was terribly disappointed that we couldn't get through the commission process. Thank you, Ellie. Yes, I was really looking forward to working with the commission, but I was only willing to do it in a nonpartisan manner. And so if the only way to be brought into the commission was to be brought in by one of the partisan affiliated law firms, then I prefer to sit aside. I've been working with a number, our team has been working with a number of commissions. We've been working with New Mexico. We've done public input for the Michigan Commission, been working with the People's Maps Commission in Wisconsin. And it's been fascinating to see around the country how it's gone differently. You all in Virginia nearly had a co-chair quit live. Well, Utah actually had a commissioner quit live and walk out. So it's been a really like nitty-gritty, lively, like real-time democracy process around the country that I feel very privileged to get to be part of in many states.
Hey, Moon.
Yes.
I'm gonna move us along, but if you and Todd want to look through the, and Greg, I think a lot of these questions are for you. If you all want to look through the Q&A and start typing out some answers so we can try to get to as many people's questions before we run out of time, that would be awesome.
Absolutely, you bet.
There's a bunch in there that are not for me to answer. All right, thank you all so much. We are such big fans of the team at Tufts and of their work, and so grateful anytime we get to spend time with them. I am going to turn the next part of our program over to Christian Martinez. He's an advocacy specialist with CASA, and he's going to talk a little bit about the continued need for the public to be involved in this process. So
Thank you, Liz.
On to you.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Christian Martinez, and I am the advocacy specialist at CASA. CASA is a nationwide organization advocating for immigrants, Latinx, and the working class community. Tonight, I am speaking on behalf of CASA on the importance of being involved in the redistricting process. At CASA, we fully support representation in the Commonwealth of Virginia and allow communities to have elected officials that can relate to their community when creating legislation at the General Assembly. Virginia is your home, your community, and this is your opportunity to make a difference by participating in this process. Your elected representatives should represent the demographic of your community. Every one of you deserve to get your voice heard. Your voice and input are the most significant help and assistance to the courts regarding redistricting. Time is not over. You have the most powerful tool when it comes to deciding on how the redistricting maps will look like in the end. We need more representation in the minority communities because we are still underrepresented in who is currently in the General Assembly. These aren't just lines being redrawn. This is so much more than that. These maps have the power to integrate communities that can hurt the demographic of who is elected. The panelists and I see value in your views and opinion, and we all want you to be involved. We know that voting is our civic duty to appreciate democracy, be educated, and allow you to have a say in what goes and doesn't. We know that the Virginia Supreme Court has the ultimate decision to decide the future of the lines in this Commonwealth, but that does not mean you still don't have a say. You can still speak up, you can still raise your concerns, and you can still make a difference of what you believe. Don't just let them make lines without hearing no one's opinion. That is not what democracy looks like here. They want to listen to your public opinion, and we need to show out when it comes to that, to show how important it is to you and everyone else in this Commonwealth. Let's not leave empty-handed and leave it up to the Virginia Supreme Court. We all need to talk on this important topic because this will decide how our elected officials will shape out for our future. VirginiaRedistricting.org is the way to go. The many ways you can help shape the maps are by commenting on the maps, commenting on Virginia Redistricting Commission's work, proposing a community of interest, or even proposing a map. There are many ways you can impact how the court will look at what the public has said and consider your thoughts. Talk about your community and what you want for representation. You know your community the best, and which is why your input is crucial. Talk about what your community needs and how elected officials can help give that. Communities should have equal concerns when it comes to redistricting lines, and if they don't do this right, things won't go well and communities won't get what they deserve. Sign up, sign up, sign up. This is the best way to show the Virginia Supreme Court what your community deserves. The more community input we have, the more of a difference it will make. Having someone represent your community who genuinely knows what is going on and who can relate to the community is what we need to decide what to do. But then we just got to execute and raise our voices and concerns. You are essential. In Virginia, Latinos hold 10% of the population. That needs to change. We should see the representation we see in the census replicate to our elected officials in the General Assembly. For example, Manassas Park City, 45.3%, Manassas City, 42.9%, Prince William County, 25.2%, and Harrisonburg City, 23.2% are Hispanic or Latino. Latinos hold an impact in elections and should make an impact on redistricting. Redistricting allows room for something bigger. Be involved by continuing to follow what the Virginia State Supreme Court is doing. Look out for information on public comments. The Virginia State Supreme Court will be starting on their page. Be involved in their process as much as you can. Spread the word on Twitter on why redistricting is essential to you by tagging @CommissionsVirginia. The ways you can be involved is endless. They're endless. Don't talk with fire or hate, but actually with knowledge and wisdom. Getting your point across is all that matters. In the end, we just need to find a way to be involved in the process and not give up just because Virginia State Supreme Court is drawing the maps. I hope all the wisdom and encouragement I spoke tonight sends the message that you are essential and needed for the continued success of this great Commonwealth. Thank you.
Christian, thank you so much. I think that it's so important for all of us to remember that this process isn't done yet. The commission's part of the process is done for the General Assembly maps and maybe done for the congressional maps, but Virginia's redistricting is not done, and we do still have a place in it as members of the public. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're going to take a look at some of the specific ways you can still get involved. Christian mentioned some of them, and I just want to give you all the tools that you need to make your voice heard. And, you know, this is going to look a little different than it has over the past few months. You're not speaking to the commissioners for the most part anymore, but you are speaking to the special masters and the justices, and you are going on the record right now, contributing to the comments that are on map proposals, contributing to the written comment, the giant repository of written public comment that the commission has received. You're going on record with the Supreme Court and with these justices and with these special masters. So I just want to go through a couple slides. The biggest tools we have for public feedback right now, and some of these might change, some of these might get more specific, some of them we may get new opportunities, but what we know now, number one is to still comment on existing map proposals. If you go to virginiaredistricting.org, which I don't know if you all visit it quite as often as I do, but I think a lot of you come real close, if not more. And you know your way around this site, but the right-hand column has a lot of options. Go to participate, go to the view 2021 plans and comment. You can go to the maps, you can view anything that's been submitted by the commission or members of the public or groups like VSET that got mentioned earlier. And you can go in there and you can comment directly on the map. It's like dropping a little Post-it note. I think that is a really specific, easy to understand and easy to transfer over to a new group of people way to make your voice heard. The second one is to continue, again, on the commission site. At this point, continue to use their public comment form. Again, we are still going on the record. Once the special masters start their work, I don't know that this way is going to be all that effective because they will have been given all of the information from the commission. But I think at this point, this is still a good way to go. So I wrote a little asterisk down here. This is especially effective for congressional maps because those are technically still in the hands of the commission. They're not officially SCOVA's job yet. And again, before the special masters are selected. Again, the same right-hand column, this is an information and background. There's a submit comment form. It's a Google form. It's super easy to use. So if you've got last minute comments, concerns about the maps, concerns about the process, all of that can go in there. The last tool, and this is where I think we'll learn more as, honestly, as the court makes decisions. I think it's not even just that we don't know what's happening yet. I don't think the court's made a lot of these decisions yet. And Greg touched on that earlier. But they have said in the rules, and there's a link to the rules in the chat that I placed earlier while Greg was speaking. They will submit written comment via a letter to the clerk's office. We're pretty sure that they're taking email. They've said that they will accept that letter in electronic form. So you can email the clerk. Her name is Muriel Teresa Pitney. That is the email address. Certainly at this point, I wouldn't necessarily treat this method quite the same as the public input form on the commission. I would remember that this is truly just Ms. Pitney's email address. Her office, and certainly she as an individual, are not making any decisions about the maps. So I would urge you to be respectful. I would urge you to, at this point, use this tool a bit sparingly. And if you can speak on behalf of a group, instead of sending 10 emails from 10 individuals, I would send one and sign it from all of you. And I think this is also the place to make very specific asks about a map, and really not that. And this is a real quality over quantity, I think, tool at this point. We will see if they open up more tools for communication. I've got to think this woman's inbox is going to look like a crazy place. So we'll keep you all posted. We are also hoping to create an online form that makes it easier to submit this information directly to the clerk or whoever ultimately is the recipient of this feedback. That should be something we can roll out next week. And we'll have the guidelines for use there as well. So again, this is not necessarily the one you need to rush out and send an email to Ms. Pitney tonight. I would use the other tools first. And then we'll go from there. And we, of course, will do our best to keep everybody in the loop. And anytime there's a new development or a new option or a new tool, we will make sure people know about it. Our partners, everybody on this call, the league and the NBNRO and CASA and VSET and the NAACP and all of these groups we've been working with who are working on this issue, we'll make sure this information is as widely disseminated as we can. The other tool that may be available, and again, it's just a thing we don't know yet. I think Greg mentioned earlier, the special masters can opt to have public hearings. And if those become available, again, all the groups I just named, we will make sure that we continue the education and training necessary for people to effectively be heard at those hearings. We'll make sure people know when they are and how to sign up and how to be heard. So yeah, watch this space, watch all of our groups and our websites and our social media and sign up for emails. I know this time of year, everyone's inbox, again, looks terrifying. But we will make sure to keep you in the loop and make sure that you are able to communicate with the justices and the special masters as much as possible. And with that, I'm gonna open us up for Q&A, and we're going to try to get through as many of these as we can. You all ask such good questions. Usually when we do these, there aren't that many questions, but you all have asked a lot of good ones. So panelists, if you want to look through, and again, if you want to grab any of the more straightforward questions in writing, we can take care of some of those. Otherwise, Lois, we can just start at the top.
Well, what I was going to do, because I do see them answering questions, I wanted to look at to see who's still logged on that had these questions in the beginning of the session, because I feel like if they stayed on this long, we need to answer.
We need to answer their questions.
So let me go to, let's see, Pete. The other two aren't still on. Yeah, Pete is still on. His question is, will the General Assembly have an up or down vote on the special masters maps as they would have had on the commission's maps? Suzanne wanted to answer that.
Oh, sorry, it was an accidental, but the answer is no. Greg covered this a little bit earlier. So once it's gone to SCOVA, the General Assembly doesn't have another role to play. Obviously, they can provide comment, right? Obviously, they are supplying names for the special masters. And then if in some future time there is other litigation on these maps, they could potentially be involved in that as well. But there is no up or down vote.
Okay, thank you. Trish is still on as well, so I'd like to have her question answered. I'm concerned about the partisanship of the special map masters that will be chosen and fear that we may end up with the same impasse as we had with the commission. Please address this concern.
And Greg, do you want to take this one? This is kind of a theme of a couple of the questions.
Sure. Again, the special masters are not partisans, they're academics. And they come from, a particular expertise, which is more focused on applying the criteria and law to the circumstances and facts of this situation. So I don't think we face the risk. The commission had as one of its map jars appointed by the GOP, the fellow who actually drew the maps for the GOP in 2011. If that person is nominated, then I think there should be some concern expressed in the comments that that was a partisan individual. If they bring in honest academics, I don't see partisanship as a problem.
Thank you. Greg, and
can I
go
add
ahead,
something? the Supreme Court, I mean, when the maps were redrawn, the congressional maps were redrawn, and we ended up adding a district, cutting Bobby Scott's district down, and they added a district which was eventually won by Don McEachin. That was drawn by a special, master, but it also was a Republican court. So, and then in the end, it was the Republican Supreme Court that, a Republican dominated Supreme Court that voted to protect the maps in 2019. So I think that, a lot of times, the courts do get political, or at least they feel political for people because the decision doesn't go their way, one way or the other. But I think that the judges in the end will be a lot less partisan in looking at this process than it would have been had those doors closed around and at the General Assembly and maps would have been drawn. Now, one side may have been happier than another, but then we'd have been back in the same problem again in 10 years with another group of legislatures leading that process. So I think people need to understand that when you litigate cases, you have an administrative record. And what we're telling you right now is that you need to add to this administrative record. You need to analyze the data in the administrative record and make your points so that the masters are able to grab a snippet of information that might help them reach a decision that is fair. And what we're looking for is not partisan maps, we're looking for fair maps. So I think people need to be sure that they understand that process.
And Phil, I don't know if you could answer, well, this would be directed to Phil or Greg. Do you know which states have successfully completed redistricting and is not being contested?
That might be a good Suzanne question.
I can take that if it's helpful. So there are a handful of states. Indiana, Maine, Nebraska are the ones that come to my mind.
Well, but the question was not being contested.
Right.
Are you predicting that those won't be contested?
Thus far, there has been no litigation filed in Indiana, Nebraska, or Maine. I think we're probably safe in Indiana and Nebraska. Jury's out on Maine. But I think one of the things to look at is those states have very different demographics than Virginia. Those states have very different political geography than Virginia. And those states have far fewer eyes on them as far as swing votes, right, in Congress than Virginia does. So they're in a different realm of redistricting.
I can guarantee you one state that wouldn't have got through without litigation, and that's the Commonwealth, because it's been litigation for the last 30 years for in some realm with redistricting in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it was almost guaranteed that the Commonwealth was going to end up in courts in one way or the other. And it was, I think, disingenuous in a lot of the debate up to this point that the legislature would write some maps and then we'd go off in a merry way. They were going to end up in litigation one way or the other. We couldn't even get through this process without litigation. If you remember, there's already a case that was filed before the Supreme Court on prison gerrymandering. So we were going to court in Virginia one way or the other. This is different. If this case went to the Supreme Court in litigation, people would have to write amicus briefs. People would have to participate through lawyers. You've got a process now where you can participate as a regular citizen in the process and not have to go out and spend a ton of money on a lawyer to write an amicus brief. This is a different process. So we need to take advantage of this process because you're not going to see this come along very often. And this was written into the constitutional amendment. It was written into the criteria legislation to allow people to get involved and not have to hire lawyers to file and interest groups to file amicus briefs. So take advantage of this while you can.
And Phil, you touched really briefly on the prison gerrymandering lawsuit that just went to the Supreme Court. And I just want to highlight that real quick, as there were a couple questions about, the concern that the court is conservative. And I know we've touched on this a little bit throughout the evening, but I just want to reiterate that if the Supreme Court of Virginia wanted to help Republicans in the redistricting process, they had an opportunity gift wrapped for them in this prison gerrymandering case, which was brought by a sitting Republican senator and several other co-plaintiffs looking to overturn the prison gerrymandering ban. And that would, because prisons are usually in rural districts, rural areas, which tend to be in districts represented by Republicans, the prison gerrymandering is going to tend to disfavor Republicans in those rural areas. So overturning that would have been a really clear nod that the court was going to favor Republicans in the redistricting process, and they unanimously declined to do so. So I just would point that out as a comforting data point that the Supreme Court of Virginia is not a partisan boogeyman.
Yeah, that case, statutes have gone down with their decisions. A lot of things have occurred under this Supreme Court that if they were a partisan boogeyman, you would think they would have differently. I mean, they summarily threw that case out. It wasn't even close. They were like, beat it. We don't even want to hear it. And what they did was they supported the law, and they supported the statute, and they supported the legislature. And so that's what we think is going to happen here. There's criteria, there's constitutional requirements, there's federal requirements that are all come into play. And I believe the court will follow those requirements and draw maps as best they can. But you have to let them know what you think. But don't, as Liz say, make your comments trivial, my street, my neighborhood. Use the information that Moon has provided and others have provided, analyze these maps, and try to look at the more global issue here when you make comments to the Supreme Court.
Tim has a question. It seemed like it would be for our legal experts, and they want to know why having legislatures on the Redistricting Commission not considered to be a conflict of interest?
This might be a better question for Liz and 121, but if you worked on this process, there was absolutely no way the legislatures were going to pass the constitutional amendment or any legislation without them having some input. And you can say that maybe they baked the process for themselves, but there was absolutely you're talking about going from 200 plus years of legislatures writing voting maps, and then you're going to say they're going to wipe their own selves out. We are talking about politicians here. So this was this was the process that worked. This is what got through. It wasn't perfect, but it did provide two things that are very critical. It provided transparency, and that everybody got to see how the sausage was being made. And secondarily, it provided input that you could sit through those meetings, and some of us sit through a lot of those meetings. Some of us participated in those meetings. Some of us made comments, but that had never occurred before. And now we're at the process where the Supreme Court, instead of, again, having a situation where only lawyers can write amicus briefs to the case, is going to allow you citizens to participate in this process. And that's what the main thing we wanted to tell people tonight, is that you can participate, and you need to participate in this process. But again, don't be trivial. Make your input strong.
I would add, I think, Tim, to your excellent question. I mean, gerrymandering is inherently a conflict of interest. It's been a conflict of interest, not legally, but it has been legislators across the country drawing their own districts, preserving their own jobs for centuries. And so we're further from a conflict of interest than we were before. And Phil mentioned, this had to get through our legislature. I think it's really important to remember that Virginia is the first state to get the legislature to give up the map drawing power by going through our legislature. We're the first state to not be able to go around the legislature through a citizens initiative. We couldn't, no matter how many signatures we collected, we couldn't go directly to the ballot. We had to go through the legislature. So it's still a really huge step. So I don't know why it's not a conflict of interest either, but it hasn't been for centuries. So we're going to hopefully keep moving in that direction.
It seems like the following the comment from Ladler kind of piggybacks off of that, Liz, because it says, it sounds as if we can be sure that Virginia Supreme Court won't try to save incumbent seats, which is not the purpose of redistricting, it seems to me. So wouldn't that kind of piggyback somewhat of what you were talking about?
Yeah, Greg, that's probably a good question for you. if SCOVA's interested in saving incumbents seats, making sure they live in their districts or not.
And, that's not in the criteria, the statutory criteria, which is what the special masters will be following. Now, I understand that they included incumbents' residences in the database, so that data may be available. But that's not a priority. It's not part of the criteria. And if the special masters don't include it, then it will not be part of the maps that are submitted to the court. So I don't think there's any great impetus to protect incumbents in this process that the court will be engineering.
And Greg, it seems like this one would pertain to you as well, because the question from Janice is, just popped up. Does the court have to choose the special masters from the recommendations? Could the two parties just recommend the most extreme people they can find to be special masters?
Well, the statute and the rule does say that the court will choose from the lists provided by the General Assembly leadership. I don't think they're going to go out and do their own independent research. And in the federal cases in Richmond, for instance, the special masters were chosen from nominations submitted by the parties. So that's a fairly typical process. And as Moon mentioned a little while ago, there aren't that many of them who have the requisite qualifications and academic qualifications and experience, to meet that role. So, I don't think the court is going to select a partisan, for this function.
Greg, can I run through? And we should probably wrap up, but I feel like I'm seeing some themes in the questions, so I'm going to try to get through a couple of them. And again, I think they're mostly for Greg, but oh gosh, and of course I lost them. Some of the questions have to do with what the special masters will be instructed to do. Will they have to follow the criteria? My understanding is that the court is required to follow the same criteria as the commission, so it would make sense for them to instruct the special masters to do so. But then please correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not the expert here. And to follow up, what happens if the special masters come back with maps? What are the justices, what if anything are the justices required to do with those plans?
Well, as far as the criteria, the statute 30-399, establishment of districts by the Supreme Court, that was adopted contemporaneously with the passage of the amendment, does say that any plan for congressional or state legislative districts established by the court shall adhere to the standards and criteria for districts set forth in the Constitution and Section 24.2304, which is the criteria statute. So the court is directed by statute to follow the criteria, and that would be the same instruction that would be given to the special masters. I suppose there's some sort of potential concern that the court is being instructed to do something that is not required in the Constitution itself, because the Constitution is silent as to what criteria the court should apply. But my suspicion is that the court will follow the law, and the criteria would be what the special masters would be utilizing in drawing their proposed maps. And the rule says that the two special masters shall work together to develop any plan to be submitted to the court for its consideration. So under the court's own rule, it is looking to the special masters to submit a plan or plans for the court to consider. So I think that's what they're going to do. And, so I think that's pretty clear.
All right. Lois, do you see any others we can kind of cover quickly? I think what this is telling us is we should probably have more sessions. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to. I know that I will put the information to reach me and to reach the staff at One Virginia in the chat.
Yeah, I'm putting that-
And I put Moon's in there as well. Plus we still got to keep Todd. So please follow up with us. We will have more of these. We've been doing panels like this throughout the process to really try to shepherd folks through this brand new system. But I want to turn our program over to Delegate Michael Futrell real briefly here at the end to wrap us up and send us home. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to all of our attendees for your presence, for your great questions. Michael, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Every time we have one of these, we walk out even more inspired because we understand that there is so much that we can continue to do to make an impact into the system. I want to make sure that we are clear that the process did what it was supposed to do. So as we get ready and we're looking into what comes next with the Supreme Court and everything that comes, it's just I want you all to remember that change is hard. At times things seem messy, but the goal is to weather the storm because we're going to come out better on the other end of this process. And so just to be clear, we do these meetings so that way it's not just about those who can show up and make it here, but we also make sure that we record all of these sessions. We want you to encourage others if they have any questions or thoughts or say, well, help me understand what redistricting look like. We want to make sure that we give you the tools to be successful. So we're going to make sure that Lois is going to post into the chat where you can go to the NBNRO YouTube page where you can see all of the other sessions that we've had the opportunity to be able to record. As we know, this fight, as Phil said, we are just at the beginning stages of the next step. But the only way that this works for all of us is we stay involved in the process. We might not have been excited about how all of this has transpired when it came to the commission, but the real determining factor is going to be what are the maps that we are going to end up with. And so as we get ready to move forward, we just want to, again, just encourage each and every one of you to stay involved in the process. So again, you can follow our YouTube page, the NBNRO YouTube page. You can follow us on Facebook and all of our social media, because again, while we're working with all of our partners, while we're working with One Virginia 2021, the League of Women Voters, CASA, of course, everybody loves Moon, and we thank Greg and we thank Suzanne and everyone who's come to be a part of this. We understand that it's going to take each and every one of us to see the success that we're looking for. So we are just truly grateful at NBNRO for each and every one of our partners and each and every one of you. So as we get ready to move forward, we're going to move forward together because we know that we are going to be okay at the end of this. And this is just the first step. So we look forward to seeing everyone on our next.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here. We will get the video out to everyone as soon as we can. Check out the YouTubes and the websites, and there's lots of great places to find us, to find our emails and all of the answers to all of your questions. We are going to be doing our best to get any questions we didn't answer. We'll save the chat. We'll try to get those answers to you all in the coming days. But please join us for our next session when we schedule that. And we look forward to continuing to talk to all of you and working through this process together. So thank you all. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you all so much for being here.
Bye-bye.